Hello and welcome.
Oh, I'm back. Sorry about that. Right? Hey guys, James Fee. We're with hanging with James Fee. I got fun talk today. We're going to be talking about cartography, and we've got Gretchen Peterson, who has written not one but two books on cartography. So it should be really good. I've got my air conditioner cranked up because it is actually 88 degrees today in Tempe, Arizona. Which you might say, why would you have it cranked? Well, it's about 50–60% humidity, which for me is basically swimming into a pool. I've got Madeline and Gretchen with me. Madeline, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Madeline. I work at WeoGeo. I'm coordinating this show, and I'll also be tracking your comments on the YouTube. And during the last 10 minutes of the show, we're going to answer all your questions for Gretchen and for James. And we also have an exciting contest going on today that James can tell you about.
Yeah, so we're giving away, actually, I was going to go grab the book, but I don't have her book yet. So maybe, as I said, I can maybe win the contest. There's the book. I'm going to be quiet. Madeline's got it up there.
There it is. It's awesome. I've been looking at it.
So that book, we're going to give away 2 copies to 2 great questions to Gretchen. And if you can stump her on a cartography question, Gretchen is going to give you a free iPad. So that should be exciting. Right, Gretchen?
No.
No? It seems like such a great idea, doesn't it?
I have a on fire.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
So go introduce yourself to those of us, or those people who have not heard of you before.
Yeah, I'm Gretchen Peterson, and I write about cartography, and I do analysis in cartography for my business, which is Peterson GIS. And yeah, that's me. So I just came out with a new book, and that's why I'm talking with James about cartography today.
Cool. Well, so we all have, we were for those of us who didn't see, we were actually talking about projections and people in the pre-show about, everybody's got their favorite projection. Gretchen, what's yours? Because it's probably not Mercator. We were joking about that it's guarantee it's not Mercator.
Mercator. No, I like the Winkle Triple. Yep.
Why?
That's my favorite, mainly because it sort of rolls off the tongue when you say it. But it's what National Geographic uses, and it has a sort of minimal distortion around the world. So that's my favorite. But you got to use whatever you got to use for, the what level of zoom you've got going on, and things like that, and where you are in the world. So can't say you have a total. I can't say I have a favorite overall. But be by the map.
Right. I kind of like Mercator because it cuts off the poles, and it's really cold up there. So I just don't even want to know what's going on up there. Right? And it makes Greenland humongous, which we all like.
We're used to it, at least, yeah.
Right? You wouldn't know if Greenland was actually sized correctly. You wouldn't know. You couldn't tell what it was.
Oh, that might be true, yeah.
Because I think it's the size of Rhode Island, really, isn't it? Give or take. What about you, Madeline? What's your favorite projection?
Oh gosh.
Oh, put her on the spot.
That is tricky. I haven't really picked a favorite one. I actually, Gretchen's choice is awesome. I concur with that one. I do like the one that's like the triangles that fold out just for novelty. I don't know the name of it though, sorry. And I just had a request from one of our viewers that we define a projection, just in case anyone who's watching is unfamiliar with the concept. But it's basically how we flatten our wonderful spherical Earth down onto a sheet of paper, and there's a lot of ways of doing that. So.
Right, yeah, if you cut, how do you get a globe to be flat? If you cut a tennis ball in half, you can push the inside in and then it pops up and it jumps. It's like we used to do that when I was younger. We'd always cut tennis balls in half because I never played tennis and I could never figure out what a tennis ball was for. So if anybody wants a cheap toy to give to their kid, just take a tennis ball and a hacksaw, cut it in half, and then push the inside in, and after a couple seconds it pops and everybody giggles, and you just realize you used a tennis ball for something worthwhile.
All right, I know what I'm doing with the rest of my day.
Clearly. Oh no. So I guess in conjunction with projections, Gretchen, what's your favorite map out there? I mean, if someone said, Gretchen, I can buy you any map and you can put it on the wall behind you, besides the map that's clearly behind you right now, what would it be?
Yeah, I wonder what projection this map's in, actually. It's from the 16th century. So, anyway, yeah, my favorite map. I'm really into map art right now, and so I guess right now my favorite map would be a series of maps by an artist named Lena Corwin. And there's one of her maps in my book, but they're my favorite because she makes these maps of each city around the world, and she has a book of the maps that I have. I think I've got it here. Can you see? There you go. So that's like what her maps look like. So they're pictorial, right? And they're just real simple, but that's what a map should really evoke, a sort of sentimentality about a place, right? If you're talking about something that's not just a road map or an atlas or something. And so that's what I really like about her maps, is that you could put a whole series of them on your wall, which I kind of want to take apart the book and frame each map that's in here and put them on my wall. But, you know, for example, for Portland, she's just got maybe 6 buildings and 3 different places, and there's a person on a bicycle, you know, riding on the path, and so it really evokes like a feeling about the place. And since you don't want to know, you know, in a map art, like every little detail about, you know, the vicinage of the place, but just a few salient bits, you know, that spark your curiosity and evoke that sentimentality that I really like. So those are my favorite right now. I have a lot of maps that I like, but I keep that one on my desk for inspiration.
Right? Do you have the ones that have the little sea monsters off the coast?
Yeah, the one behind me.
Right, because you get to the edge of the map and you get lazy and you don't want to continue mapping, so the easiest thing to do is just say, well, I saw some sea monsters, and nobody will go check out to see what's further down that road or river or ocean, right?
There you go. I know, it's an old cartography trick, right? Add a serpent or something, and yeah, if you just don't know what's there.
It's funny, the stuff that I'm liking right now is from Stamen, their watercolor.
Oh, those are really neat. Yeah.
You know, those are really neat. I've actually got it as my desktop right now, and it's just, you know, as you said, it's you know, doing it worldwide is hard to be emotional across the whole world, you know, whereas in Phoenix, obviously, it's brown and hot and, you know, no water, even though the map shows water. You know, that's what I always love about OpenStreetMap is people say, here's a lake, but in reality, it's a intermittent lake that hasn't had water in it in about 5,000 years. But damn it, there's a lake in the middle of my town. You know, versus, you know, Portland, for example, has a river that actually has water in it, which of course is always awesome. You know, those are pretty cool too. So I guess, do you find, Gretchen, cartography, you know, traditional cartography was all about the printed map, right? You print it, you created something, you printed it out, and you stuck it on the wall. But now, I guess, with you know, mobile devices and slippy maps, a lot of new cartography is being done for computer consumption, I guess, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is.
And so, what do you, as a cartographer, look at when you're trying to create a map that's going to be maybe both printed out on a plotter and then one that needs to be viewable on a little mobile device? That's the pain in the butt, right?
Yeah. Well, you've got to change it for the mobile device. I mean, there's no getting around that. I mean, it used to be, you know, you'd be asked to make a printed map for, say, somebody's presentation, you know, at a public meeting, and then you'd also be asked to make the same thing for a slideshow, and you still had to change things, because on the slideshow it needed to be more simple than when somebody's 1 foot away from your map looking at it in detail. So for this, but then you go even further when you talk about a digital device and what's, you know, I mean, I guess you can zoom in and things like that, but I think you've got to change your design depending on the device in many cases. There's one guy, if you look up Scavenger Maps, he has these printed maps that are in the Stavanger region of Norway, and there's one of those in the book too. and they're printed and they're posted in public on these kiosks, really big maps. But he also has digital versions of those that can go on your mobile device. And in that case, I think he's made them simple enough or pictorial enough that they do translate pretty well to a smaller screen. So yeah, I think it's just going to be a lot of work if you want to try and do both and make them look the same. And I guess the deal is if you're going to have a series of maps that are both printed and digital, you got to at least have a similar look and feel.
Yeah, I mean, back in the old days, right? You know, the arc plot days. You knew your scale, you knew the size of your map, and you knew your audience. You know, it was relatively easy to figure out how to design a map. But now that everything is really available to anyone, anywhere, it makes it a little bit more difficult to create cartography that's viewable by someone in the United States that went to college, somebody that lives in Europe that you know, is 10 years old and viewing the map on their Android device, someone in Africa who's, I guess, looking at a printed page of it, and someone in Japan who doesn't read English. You know, the map sort of has to fit across all those people and all the ways they're consuming it. You know, that's, I think, one of the more difficult things for me is I've changed from creating those static maps one-off for one customer to trying to figure out how to create cartography that will be viewed by almost anyone anywhere. And that's why I guess it's kind of interesting about your book. You know, how one can go about thinking about how a map can be created. You know, what kind of tools you use, and you know, what kind of choices you make as you go along. What's sort of one of the first things that someone should be thinking about when they create a map these days?
Well, you've got to be thinking about the design and not the device, I would say. So overall, what do you want to be conveying with your map? And with the printed map, like you're saying, it's a lot easier to just make your design and then make it happen. But with the digital device, you really have to design in tandem with your development, and they really have to go together because you're going to be constrained by it's not as easy to do cartography on devices on you know, your iPad or your other devices that you're going to put it on as it has been, you know, in Illustrator for a print map, for example, or even in ArcGIS now for a print map. So you're going to be constrained by what you can do. And I was listening to somebody talk last year, a professor at CSU, who had all these great ideas for an interactive web map he was going to do. And, you know, they spent a lot of time developing the design at the very beginning, but then they ran into problems with what they could actually do. You know, so they spent a lot of time on stuff that they couldn't actually develop and design and create at the end. So I really think that if you're going to design for a device like an interactive web map or something, you really need to do it in tandem with your development staff. I think it was Nathaniel Kelso who was blogging about the Carto developer a few weeks ago. I mean, he coined that term. So, you know, are you a cartographer? Are you a developer? Are you both? So there's a lot of us cartographers who are not developers, and how are we gonna? It's, yeah. I think that a lot of people thought cartography was dead because of the end of the paper map era, but it's just kind of like there's a whole new world opening up, and we're kind of out here going, what are we going to do? You know, do we need to become developers? Are we going to wait until those environments, you know, do we need to learn CSS, or are we going to wait until it's all click and drag stuff like we're used to?
Well, you know, you're sort of right on it. I mean, in a way, for me, cartography now, we're sort of in the glory years of cartography. You know, there's some more amazing things that I've seen in the last year and a half than I've probably seen in the last 20 years. Some of it, it's even printed maps are benefiting from people starting to get back in the art of creating maps. But, you know, I was sort of joking around with Gretchen earlier that, you know, I used to work with ArcPlot. And in a way, ArcPlot, what was it? It was you basically authored a script that created a map, and you'd define everything where the points were. I mean, it was a big pain in the butt, and you'd have to run the ArcPlot to output something to, your HPGL2 format, and then rasterize that to see what you did. But in a way, that's almost what's going on right now with some of these tools, such as Tilemill. Except you see the feedback quicker, right? So you're creating a map, you're authoring what it should be, and then you're rendering it separate, versus maybe the last 20 years was more, I render the map as I go along. I drag in, my water layer first. Okay, I'll make that blue. Then I drag in, maybe the parks layer. I guess I'll make that green. And you sort of went through just slowly doing that, but now doing it programmatically. I used to remember I had all these ArcPlot files sitting around, and I'd open them up in a text editor, copy a couple lines out, dump it in, I was done. And it almost seems like we're getting there outside of the desktop environment, but it looks like, at least let's just use ArcMap as an example. That's still what a lot of people call traditional cartography, right? You drag and drop your layer in. You go into the preferences, which has 1,000 little things that you can set, and you hope to God you pick the right color, before you go. Do you see any maybe move in the desktop environment to sort of embracing some of the, as I said, some of the old school cartography with ArcPlot, and then some of the new age, I guess I don't even know what people call it now, but the CSS sort of method of creating cartography?
All right, so what's that question? Moving from
where we are right now. I mean, if you think about, if I open up ArcMap, right, and I'm going to create a map, thousands of people have done that, but it takes a long time, does it not?
Sure. Yes.
She's defending herself here.
Lots of GIS analysts would make a map really quickly, and
they would, and I could, as I said, I could open up ArcMap right now, and I could make a map very quickly, and I could print it, and it would have the nice standard ArcGIS north arrow on it, the scale bar that everybody, you can tell that map by just looking at a couple things.
Yeah.
What I like about CSS is it seems to give people the ability to be a lot more creative with their output versus being locked into settings that some developer in California said this is how it should be. They may be right or wrong choices, but CSS is a blank page, right?
Okay. Yeah, well, I would say there's even a third component there, and if you talk to other cartographers who've been in the business for a while, you'll see there's sort of this dichotomy between those who make maps in ArcGIS versus those who make maps in Illustrator. And then, meanwhile, we're having this discussion of which is better, making a map in ArcGIS where it's seamless and you don't have to port data over to Illustrator. Or should you have Illustrator with the map publisher plugin that enables you to, use your spatial database and edit it as you go without going back into Arc. But then, meanwhile, we're kind of getting blown away by what's going on with the whole CSS thing, which a lot of us still don't know, even what that is, or how to develop for interactive maps on the web. So I see that as being about 5 years in the future, and people who are doing it right now are really on the cutting edge.
So which software packages do you typically use in your workflow?
I almost always use ArcGIS because I'm actually an analyst first and foremost, and sort of a cartography teacher secondly, and cartography writer. And the reason for that is because I'm a natural resources scientist, and so I do analysis, and then I need to make maps for my clients to explain the results of what I just did. But if I don't make good maps, then they don't understand what I did, and my results aren't compelling. They're not explaining anything to anybody. So I realized that mapping was critical to getting my point across. I mean, if you spend an entire month, on working on an analytical procedure that nobody can understand or figure out what it means at the end, then you've just totally wasted your time. So I figured out that it needed to make good maps, but there wasn't any good map making materials out there to help people like me. So that's where I got into teaching cartography and teaching myself and also others on how to do that. Where was I going with that? I think there was some kind of endpoint to that discussion. And then, and now, of course, we're merging into the interactive maps, which I also do for people, but it's still kind of on an analytical track because, so for example, I just finished an analysis for Save the Pooter, which is actually really confusing to people. I've laid it out on my blog in an entry, and I'm still getting these questions, how did that work, and what's the Euclidean allocation, and things like that. But so when I sent it to my client, I sent it as an interactive map, so they could zoom in, turn on and off what I was doing, and then it all of a sudden clicked to them, exactly how this model worked. And having your client able to understand what you did is just pretty, that's like the goal of the whole thing. So that now they can explain to everybody else what it was that I did for them. So that's where it comes in handy. So I'm always like, I write the books without any kind of software in mind. It's just, design is good design no matter what device you're on, right? And so start with that and then figure out what you can do. And so that's where I come from on that.
So how do you one day just say, I'm going to write a book on cartography? Did you just think you woke up one morning and said, you know what, I'm sick and tired of there being no good cartography books. I'm going to create it myself? Or, did someone say, here's $1 million, write a book, and
oh yeah, right.
You'll be
rich. No, the idea has been in my head since I started work in 1999, I believe it was, and that's when I started at a consulting firm doing natural resources analysis. And I was actually asked to make these big poster maps of a refugia analysis I did for Pacific Northwest salmon. So we had these maps of where the best habitat is for salmon in the Pacific Northwest, which is pretty interesting data, right? And so you want to show it in a nice way. Well, I printed out these horrible maps that were supposed to be lining the entranceway to this big consulting firm. And it's pretty embarrassing because I knew they were bad, but how do I make them better? And there's nothing out there. So it was in my head to do this for a long time, ever since then, really, because, there was nothing out there. So I was probably collecting information for 6 years or so before I actually wrote the book.
It's interesting that one has to basically say to yourself, look, if we're going to make something like cartography better, someone's got to stand up and say, well, okay, let's do it. So I think it's awesome, and I think I need to go out and buy this book, this cartography toolkit, because as I said, I've got Gretchen's old book here, which isn't really old, but this is cool stuff, and it's I think, Gretchen, it's awesome you're trying to help improve people and how they create cartography. And as you said, as Gretchen said, the one thing that's most awesome is doesn't matter what application you use. It can be whatever you're using and it'll work. So on that, do we have any questions?
Yes,
Madeline?
actually we have a lot of excellent questions and comments, and we should really get to those. So we can, and we'll probably decide about the winners of the comment contest after the broadcast.
Yeah, I'll tweet about it. So if anyone just follow me, we'll tweet, and Gretchen will tweet too. So. Okay,
cool. So let's see. Jonah says that he likes the Burgess star projection for doing U.S. maps.
I got to look that one up.
Yeah, me too. Let's see. Here's a question. Paul asks, is a subway map an example of map art?
A subway map.
On the wall of Subway. Oh, because those have the old subways. Yeah, interesting.
All right, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Subway map. No, I call that a diagrammatic map. A subway map has no true scale. So where you have a great density of connections, you're squeezing the scale, and where you have fewer connections outside the city, it's you're bringing them out a little bit further. So you're trying to distribute all these connections that are all in one little small space in a way that makes sense to us visually and mentally, but not at a true scale. And so I guess in that sense it's art, because a lot of map art is not to true scale. But I generally put that in the diagrammatic category.
We have another question on a similar note. When does a map cease being a map and evolve into art?
Cease being a map and start what?
And evolve into art. How do you draw that line, or is that even a possible thing?
Ooh, that's a good question. When you start putting serpents on it, pictorials, when there isn't an actual scale.
Right.
If there's things on there that are interpretive rather than realistic.
Seems reasonable. Let's see. Oh, there's a good one here. Dan wants to know if Cartographer's Toolkit is platform software independent or hands-on with ArcGIS, and I think we already answered that question actually.
Yeah, you can use whatever you want.
Yeah.
Let's see. Are any clients asking you for interactive maps, or is the default product still a print or static map?
No, it's about 50-50 for me with my clients. I'm doing interactive maps as the results of analyses. I'm doing interactive maps as the actual, that's what the client wants. And I'm also doing print maps, although I'd say it's been a few years since I've done a big poster print map. And lately my print maps have been more like these one-off nostalgia map art pieces. For example, somebody was having their 40th birthday and they had a lot of family in Indiana, and so we did this whole map of Indiana for them for a birthday piece, And what else? So it's changed a little bit, I'd say.
Have you ever done any time-based maps? Like with the time dimension where you can go through them like that and see change?
Yeah, a few years ago, I compiled this whole database of forest harvest is what we call it in the Pacific Northwest, and so that went back many years. It was probably a couple of decades, maybe even 3 decades worth of data. And so that was really neat to see animated, because we were just seeing such a huge percentage of harvest going on in the commercial forest areas. So you really visually see what's going on in the landscape. So yeah, I think that's pretty cool when the content is applicable.
Okay, I have 2 more questions from our viewers. Let's see. Speaking of a whole new Carto world, what does Gretchen think about Mapbox's Tilemill? This blends rich cartography with CSS.
Well, that's where we come. I'm not a Carto developer. Maybe James can talk about that. I know there's been a lot of new capabilities with that, but I can't really speak to it specifically because I haven't used it.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I'll say about Carto, C-A-R-T-O, which is sort of the, I guess, the authoring language of Tilemill is, I sort of got to this earlier, it sort of gives people the freedom to create products without being constrained by the application itself. And if you learn ArcMap and you get really good at creating cartography with ArcMap, you can create absolutely beautiful maps. And you can do the same thing with Illustrator or Photoshop or probably even MapInfo and AutoCAD. If you get really good at that application, you can do amazing stuff. But what I like about Carto is it sort of removes all that complexity of an application. It allows you to just sit there and focus on, okay, I want this font to be this, it needs to be this color, it needs to be placed exactly right here, and never move it. And I think that's, maybe that's just because I used to do ArcPlot many years ago. I sort of missed that moment. I mean, for me, the most annoying thing about ArcMap over the years was it just sort of moves my labels around haphazardly. I would try and place it exactly at this point, and you come up with workarounds to do it, but it just never fails that labels would move around on me, and it drive me absolutely bonkers. So maybe I just kind of like that tools, and I guess it's the freedom of being able to create whatever you want is also pretty awesome. And hopefully, I know a couple people said this week, maybe Carto will be something that will be integrated into ArcMap at some point. Maybe the GeoIQ guys can do that.
Okay, just one last question here. Brett says, I was amazed to discover the research of A. John Kimmerling, who did rule-based 3D Carto a decade ago. What do you think will be the next frontier in academic cartographic research?
Whoa.
Oh gosh. Well, I'd say there's a lot of unknowns, but it's not going to be in navigational paper maps, like an atlas. Academic research, I'm going to say they're going to embrace that whole new big data trend, probably. I'm not one to usually talk about buzzwords like that, but I've really taken this big data thing and thought a lot about it. And, the World Economic Forum, even this year, brought it up as one of their major topics. And I think that anybody who's going into analysis or cartography is going to have to know how to mine corporate and government data sets to come up with interesting results that actually, don't go along with the fad of the moment, but actually have some societal impact for the better.
Wow, that's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. I think there's been so much good work in colors and accessibility of maps, and maybe that's something we'll see as well, is how do blind people navigate with maps. Mobile devices now have the ability to use, as we were talking with Dave Bowman last week, eyes free. How can you basically turn a map into eyes free? Is that a cartography thing? I think so. If Gretchen could describe a map to me over the phone and say the map does this, then there's no reason why someone who's blind can't understand what a map is doing. So I'd be interested to see what happens there. Well, Gretchen, I appreciate your time. Hopefully, I've had fun talking about this. Again, it's one of these topics we could talk about for 4 hours, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and can you hold up Gretchen's book there, Madeline?
Yes, here's the book, and we will continue to take questions and answers on this thread. So, yeah, feel free to comment, and we'll get the winners out soon.
Yeah,
So.
and next week, it seems odd that we're keeping this in Colorado. I guess we're moving closer to the airport now to get the heck out of Colorado. We'll be talking with Peter Batty. Do I have a Peter Batty book? I don't know if this might be the closest thing to Peter Batty book, right? Programming PHP. I don't know why I still have that on my shelf, but we'll be having Peter Batty. We're having Peter Batty next week, so that should be pretty fun. We'll be talking. What are we going to talk about, Madeline? We're talking about the future of GIS, right?
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. So there'll probably be some cartography in there, I'm sure. Well, Gretchen, thank you so much, and we'll look at those questions. We'll pick a couple, 2 of them, and we'll let you know who's going to get her book. And I probably won't be me, unfortunately. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Take care. Have a great week.
Thanks,
Bye.
James.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.